Everyone humiliated the black waitress's scars, calling her monster freak burn victim, until a veteran walked in and spotted the tattoo that changed everything. "Look what crawled out of hell today," Davidson screamed, pointing at Kesha's scarred hands as she approached with the coffee pot. "Hey Freddy Krueger, try not to scare the paying customers with that melted face." His crew of insurance vultures erupted in savage laughter that cut through Miller's diner like broken glass. "I bet she was cooking crack and blew herself up," Brett whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Or maybe her pimp taught her a lesson with a blowtorch." The cruel words hit like acid, but Kesha's hands remained steady, her dark eyes revealing nothing of the storm building inside. What these pathetic bullies didn't know was that the woman they tortured every Tuesday wasn't some helpless victim. She was a decorated war hero whose scars told a story of courage they could never comprehend. The burns covering 30% of her body weren't from some ghetto accident or domestic violence. They were battle scars earned dragging 3 wounded soldiers from a flaming Humvee in the mountains of Afghanistan. And when a grizzled veteran walked through that door and recognized the military tattoo hidden beneath those burns, their world was about to explode in ways they never imagined. "I bet it was in a fire in the projects," whispered Brett, Davidson's accountant, loud enough for her to hear. "Or maybe she was trying to cook drugs and blew herself up." Davidson laughed even louder. "Or maybe her boyfriend did it to her. You know how domestic violence is in that community." Kesha approached the table with measured steps, her posture straight, contrasting with their expectation of seeing her slump under the weight of humiliation. The morning rush had died down, leaving only the regulars and Davidson's crew, who treated Tuesday breakfast like their personal entertainment hour. Kesha Johnson was 34 years old, and had faced much worse than the insults of Davidson and his crew of small-time insurance salesmen who showed up every Tuesday to brighten their pathetic lives. What they didn't know was that every cruel word only fed something inside her that grew in silence, a strength they could never understand. "Coffee's getting cold over here, Scarface," Davidson called out, his platinum wedding ring catching the light as he tapped it against his cup. His 3 companions snickered, their expensive suits a stark contrast to the worn vinyl booths they occupied every week. They came here specifically because they knew she worked Tuesdays. She'd figured that out months ago. The burns covering 30% of her body told a story of sacrifice that these men would never understand. They saw only damaged goods, a broken woman serving them eggs and coffee. They couldn't see the warrior who had dragged 3 wounded soldiers from a burning Humvee in the mountains of Afghanistan. Or the decorated sergeant who had earned 2 Purple Hearts before her 28th birthday. "Must have been some kitchen fire," Brett whispered loudly to his colleague, making sure Kesha could hear. "Or maybe domestic violence. You know how it is in their neighborhoods." The casual racism stung less than the assumption of helplessness. But Kesha had learned to channel that pain into something else entirely. She approached their table with the same controlled movements she'd used when clearing buildings in Fallujah. The coffee pot remained steady in her grip, despite the nerve damage that sometimes made simple tasks feel impossible. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying an authority that made Davidson's smirk falter for just a moment. As she poured, her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing more of the intricate scarring and something else. A small tattoo, partially obscured by the burned tissue, peeked out just above her wrist. Davidson's eyes locked onto it immediately. Well, he said, leaning closer. "What do we have here? A little jailhouse tattoo to go with the freak show?" He grabbed her wrist suddenly, his fingers digging into the damaged skin. "Let's see what kind of trash you marked yourself with." The coffee pot hit the table with a sharp crack. For the first time in months, Kesha's composure cracked. Not from pain, she'd endured far worse, but from the audacity of this soft, privileged man, putting his hands on her without permission. In her mind, she was back in the desert, and this was an enemy combatant who had just made a fatal mistake. But this wasn't Afghanistan, and these weren't insurgents. These were just ignorant men who had no idea they were about to discover exactly who they'd been torturing every Tuesday morning. The diner fell silent, except for the hum of the ancient air conditioning unit. Every patron, every server, every cook had stopped what they were doing to watch. Davidson still held Kesha's wrist, his manicured fingers pale against her scarred skin, completely unaware that he was manhandling someone who could end his life in 7 different ways before he could blink. "Let go," Kesha said quietly, her voice carrying a tone that made the hair on the back of several necks stand up. It wasn't a request, it was a command issued by someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Davidson, drunk on his perceived power, tightened his grip instead. Not until you show us what kind of prison art you're hiding under all that burnt meat. His friends laughed nervously, sensing a shift in the atmosphere they couldn't quite identify. Behind the counter, Maria, the other waitress, reached for the phone. She'd worked with Kesha for 8 months and had never seen this expression cross her face. It was the look of someone deciding whether to show mercy or deliver justice. "You have 3 seconds, Kesha said, her free hand moving almost imperceptibly toward her apron pocket, where she kept a small tactical pen, a habit from her military days that had never died. "Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Because tomorrow, at the same time, we'll bring you another story of Black people leading the way that you won't want to miss." The door chime rang as a new customer entered, but everyone's attention remained fixed on the brewing confrontation. Davidson, emboldened by the audience, twisted Kesha's wrist to get a better look at the tattoo. What he saw made his cocky expression freeze. Partially obscured by scar tissue but still clearly visible was a small but distinctive marking. A skull with crossed arrows beneath it, surrounded by flames. It was intricate, professional, and definitely not prison work. Above it, barely legible through the burn damage, were numbers. "What the hell?" Davidson muttered, his grip loosening slightly. He'd seen enough war movies to recognize military insignia when he saw it, but this particular combination didn't make sense. Not on a waitress, not on someone he'd been treating like garbage for months. The new customer had approached the counter, but something made him turn toward the commotion. He was a big man, probably in his 40s, with graying hair and the kind of posture that screamed military even in civilian clothes. His eyes found the struggle at Davidson's table, then locked onto the tattoo now fully visible on Kesha's wrist. The color drained from his face. "Holy shit," he whispered, loud enough for several people to hear. That can't be." Master Sergeant James Rodriguez had seen that exact tattoo only a handful of times in his 22-year military career. The skull and crossed arrows belonged to Task Force Phoenix, one of the most classified special operations units in the U.S. military. The flames around it indicated active combat deployment in Operation Enduring Freedom. The numbers above it, 75th, designated the Ranger Regiment. But that wasn't what made his blood run cold. It was the woman wearing it. Rodriguez stepped forward, his movement causing Davidson to look up. "Sir," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded men in combat. "I suggest you remove your hand from that soldier immediately." "Soldier?" Davidson laughed, though it came out strangled. "This is just some scarred-up waitress." "That waitress?" Rodriguez interrupted, his voice rising, "is wearing the insignia of Task Force Phoenix. Do you have any idea what that means?" The diner had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen sounds had stopped. Kesha stood frozen, her tactical training warring with the shock of being recognized after all these years of invisibility. Davidson's grip loosened further, confusion replacing arrogance. "Task Force what? It's just some tattoo." Rodriguez was now close enough to see the full marking, and his expression shifted from recognition to something approaching awe. "Ma'am," he said directly to Kesha. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez, 82nd Airborne. I served with Phoenix Support in '09. If that ink is real..." Kesha's eyes met his, and in that moment, two warriors recognized each other across a crowded diner in suburban Ohio. The scared, scarred waitress disappeared, replaced by someone who had earned every mark on her body in service to her country. "It's real," she said simply. Davidson finally released her wrist, looking between them with growing unease. "What the hell is going on here?" Rodriguez turned to face him, and his expression was thunderous. "What's going on, civilian, is that you've been assaulting a decorated war hero. That woman you've been treating like garbage? She's got more courage in her scarred pinky finger than you've got in your entire soft, pathetic body." The silence stretched until Brett, Davidson's accountant, whispered, "What's Task Force Phoenix?" Rodriguez smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Task Force Phoenix was a joint special operations unit that conducted the most dangerous missions in Afghanistan and Iraq. They went places other soldiers couldn't go, did things other soldiers couldn't do. The tattoo she's wearing, you don't get that for serving coffee in the green zone. He turned back to Kesha, his voice softening with respect. Ma'am, if I may ask, what unit specifically? Kesha straightened to her full height, and suddenly everyone in the diner could see what they had missed for months. The way she carried herself, the controlled movements, the calm under pressure, it all made sense now. This wasn't a broken woman hiding behind scarred skin. This was a warrior who had simply been underestimated. Staff Sergeant Kesha Johnson, 75th Ranger Regiment, attached to Task Force Phoenix from 2007 to 2010, she said, her voice carrying across the silent diner with military precision. 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq, specialized in high-value target acquisition and extraction. Davidson's face had gone pale. Around the diner, phones appeared as other customers began recording what was clearly about to become something extraordinary. The scars, Rodriguez said gently. May I ask? IED in Kandahar. March 15, 2010. Kesha replied without hesitation. My convoy was ambushed. The Humvee caught fire with 3 wounded inside. I went back for them. She paused, looking directly at Davidson. All 3 survived. I spent 18 months in the burn unit at Walter Reed. The weight of her words settled over the diner like a heavy blanket. Davidson seemed to shrink in his seat, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. Jesus Christ, Brett whispered. We didn't know. No, Kesha said, her voice steady but edged with steel. You didn't know, because you never bothered to ask. You saw scars and assumed weakness. You saw a black woman working as a waitress and created your own narrative about who I must be. Rodriguez stepped closer to Davidson's table. Do you understand what she just told you? This woman ran into a burning vehicle to save her brothers in arms. While you were probably figuring out insurance premiums, she was dodging bullets and saving lives in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Davidson tried to stand, but his legs seemed to have given out. We didn't mean. You didn't mean what? Kesha asked, her voice rising for the first time. You didn't mean to call me Frankenstein. You didn't mean to make jokes about domestic violence. You didn't mean to grab me without permission and try to humiliate me in front of everyone. The entire diner was watching now, some recording, others calling friends. Word was spreading that something incredible was happening at Miller's Diner. Rodriguez pulled out his phone. Ma'am, with your permission, I'd like to make a call. There are people who need to hear about this. What people? Davidson asked weakly. The kind of people who don't take kindly to war heroes being disrespected by cowards who've never risked anything more dangerous than a paper cut. Within 30 minutes, Miller's Diner had transformed from a quiet breakfast spot into the center of a storm that was about to change everything. Rodriguez's phone calls had set events in motion that Davidson couldn't have imagined in his worst nightmares. The first to arrive was local Channel 7 News, followed quickly by the Marine recruiter from the shopping center next door. Then came Rodriguez's own unit, 3 active-duty sergeants, who had heard about one of their own being mistreated and decided to make an impromptu field trip. But it was the last arrival that made Davidson understand. He was truly fucked. Colonel Patricia Hayes walked into Miller's Diner with the bearing of someone who had commanded respect in boardrooms and battlefields across 3 continents. She was the director of Veterans Affairs for the entire county, and she had a particular interest in female combat veterans who had been failed by the system. Staff Sergeant Johnson, she said, approaching Kesha with a salute that was returned with crisp precision. Colonel Hayes, VA Liaison. Master Sergeant Rodriguez called me with a very interesting story. By now, Davidson and his crew were huddled in their booth like scared children, watching their Tuesday morning entertainment turn into a public relations disaster of epic proportions. These the individuals who have been harassing you? Colonel Hayes asked, looking at Davidson's table with the expression of someone examining something unpleasant on the bottom of her shoe. Every Tuesday for 8 months, Kesha confirmed. Comments about my appearance, assumptions about how I was injured, racial slurs, unwanted physical contact. Colonel Hayes turned to face Davidson directly. Sir, are you employed? Yes, I'm a regional manager for coastal insurance. Davidson stammered. Not anymore, you're not, said a voice from the doorway. A well-dressed woman in her 50s had entered, her face flushed with anger. "Mr. Davidson, this is Helen Martinez, your district supervisor. I've been watching the live stream of this incident for the last 10 minutes. Davidson's world was collapsing in real time. "Helen, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been spending company time harassing a war hero. That you've been representing our company while engaging in racist and discriminatory behavior. That you physically assaulted a disabled veteran." The news cameras were rolling now, capturing every moment of Davidson's destruction. His wife would see this. His children would see this. His entire community would know exactly what kind of man he really was. "Please," Davidson whispered, "this is all just a misunderstanding." Rodriguez stepped forward. "No misunderstanding. We've got 8 months of witness testimony, video evidence from today, and a woman who sacrificed her body for this country while you were sitting in an office making other people's lives miserable." But Kesha raised her hand, and the room fell silent. Everyone waited to hear what the woman at the center of this storm would say. Kesha looked around the diner at the assembled crowd. News cameras, veterans, customers who had become witnesses to something larger than a simple confrontation. For 8 months she had endured Davidson's cruelty in silence, believing that her service meant nothing in this civilian world where appearances mattered more than character. Now she understood she had been wrong. "Mr. Davidson," she said, her voice carrying the authority she had earned in the mountains of Afghanistan, "you asked me earlier what kind of work left me looking like this." Davidson couldn't meet her eyes, but she continued anyway. "The kind of work that saved 3 American soldiers from burning to death. The kind of work that required me to ignore my own safety, to ensure others went home to their families. The kind of work that took me away from my own children, for 3 combat deployments, because I believed in something bigger than myself." She stepped closer to his table, and he shrank back. "You see these scars, and think they make me weak. But they're proof of the strongest thing I've ever done. While you were building your comfortable little life, I was building a wall between you and the people who wanted to destroy everything you take for granted." Colonel Hayes stepped forward. "Staff Sergeant Johnson, I want you to know that your service record is exceptional. 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star with V device, and commendations from 3 different commanding officers. You're exactly the kind of veteran we need representing our community. Which is why," Helen Martinez added, "Coastal Insurance would like to offer you Mr. Davidson's position, along with a formal apology and a settlement for the harassment you've endured." The diner erupted in applause, but Davidson wasn't finished being humiliated. Rodriguez pulled out his phone and began reading. "This is interesting. Coastal Insurance stock is down 12% since this story broke an hour ago. Social media is calling for a boycott. Your company's main competitor just announced they're hiring military veterans exclusively for management positions." He looked up at Davidson. "Congratulations, you just became the most expensive coffee break in corporate history." But the final blow came from an unexpected source. "Daddy?" a young voice called from the doorway. Davidson's 16-year-old daughter stood in the entrance, her face red with embarrassment and tears. "Mom sent me to get you," she said. "She said everyone at school is sharing videos of you being mean to a soldier." The silence that followed was deafening. This was no longer about corporate consequences or public humiliation. This was about a man who had to explain to his child why he had spent months torturing someone who had risked everything for strangers. "Sweetheart, I can explain," Davidson started, but his daughter was already walking away. "No, Dad, I saw the video. I saw what you did." She turned back, tears streaming down her face. "Mom says she's ashamed of you. I am too." 3 months later, Miller's Diner had become something of a pilgrimage site for veterans and their families. The corner booth where Davidson used to hold court was now permanently reserved for active military and veterans, with a small plaque reading "Reserved for Heroes." Kesha no longer worked there. Her new office at Coastal Insurance was on the top floor, with a view of the highway that led out of town. The same highway Davidson had taken the day he was fired, his family having left him the week after the incident went viral. The story had been picked up nationally, spawning conversations about hidden heroes, the treatment of veterans, and the assumptions people make based on appearance. Rodriguez visited her office regularly, having become something of a local celebrity himself after the video of him defending Kesha reached 2 million views. They had started a nonprofit together, connecting isolated veterans with community resources and ensuring no other heroes suffered in silence. Any regrets? Rodriguez asked during one of his visits. Looking out at the city below, Kesha touched the tattoo on her wrist, the one that had changed everything. The scars were still there, would always be there, but they no longer felt like marks of damage. They were badges of honor, proof of a life lived in service to others. Just one, she said. What's that? I regret not telling my story sooner. I spent 8 months thinking I had to hide who I was, thinking my service didn't matter in the civilian world. She smiled, looking at the framed photo on her desk, herself with the 3 soldiers she had saved, taken at their reunion 6 months ago. Turns out, people were just waiting for someone to show them what real courage looks like. Through her window she could see Miller's diner in the distance. Every Tuesday she sent flowers to Maria and the other servers who had witnessed her transformation from invisible victim to visible hero. The flowers came with a note that never changed. For those who serve others, even when no one is watching. Davidson's former booth remained empty most Tuesdays, but occasionally a veteran would sit there, sharing stories with whoever would listen. The placard had been updated recently. It now read, "Reserved for heroes past, present, and future." Because sometimes the people society overlooks are exactly the ones who deserve to be seen the most. And sometimes, it takes a warrior to remind the world what real strength looks like.